The afternoon sun painted the city with golden tones when Ella left the building where she worked. His steps were slow, weighed down by the weight of another difficult day at the office. The busy streets seemed like a world apart, full of rushing people who barely noticed each other. Ella slung her bag over her shoulder, feeling exhaustion in every fiber of her body. Her thoughts wandered, remembering the cold stares and cutting words of her co-workers. Why was it so difficult for them to be kind? Ella sighed, wishing the world was a little kinder. It was then that something unusual caught his attention. On the sidewalk ahead, an elderly woman was kneeling, struggling to clean a stain on the floor with an old, worn-out cloth. Her movements were slow and careful, but it was clear she was having difficulty. Ella stopped, taking in the scene for a moment. A part of her wanted to keep walking, go home and forget the world outside. But another part, a stronger part, couldn't ignore someone in need of help. With a soft sigh, Ella approached the lady. "Excuse me," she said gently, "can I help you with this?" The elderly woman looked up, surprised. His eyes were a deep blue, full of wisdom and kindness. For a moment it looked like she was going to refuse help, but then a tired smile lit up her face. "Oh, darling," she replied, her voice husky but warm, "that's very kind of you. But I don't want to bother you. I'm sure you have more important things to do." Ella smiled, already kneeling next to the lady. "Nothing is more important than helping someone in need," she said sincerely. "My name is Ella. And what about you?" "Mrs. Johnson," the elderly woman replied, "but you can call me Rose. All my friends call me that." Together, Ella and Rose worked to clean the stubborn stain. While they scrubbed, they talked. Rose told Ella about her life, about how she loved tending her garden and baking cookies for her grandchildren. Her voice filled with joy when she spoke of her family, and Ella found herself smiling along with her. "You know, honey," Rose said at one point, "I haven't seen my grandchildren in a while. They're always so busy with their lives. Sometimes I feel a little alone." Ella felt her heart sink at those words. She knew the feeling of loneliness well, even though she was surrounded by people every day at work. "I understand how you feel, Mrs. Johnson." Rose, Ella replied softly. "Sometimes it feels like the whole world is running and we're left behind, doesn't it?" Rose nodded, her eyes shining with understanding. "Exactly, darling. But you know, it's times like this that make me believe there's still kindness in the world. Your kindness today. Well, it means more than you can imagine." Ella felt her cheeks flush at the compliment. "I wasn't used to receiving kind words. At work, it was more common to hear criticism and nasty comments." By the time they finished cleaning, the sun was already setting, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. Rose looked at Ella with eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you, darling," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You don't know how much this means to me. I wish I could give back in some way." Ella shook her head, a sincere smile on her face. "No need to thank me, Rose. It was a pleasure to help. In fact, I should be the one thanking you. It's been a while since I felt so useful." Rose took Ella's hands in hers, the touch soft and comforting. "You have a heart of gold, Ella. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As they said goodbye, Ella felt a pang of sadness. She didn't want that moment to end. There was something about Rose's presence that made her feel accepted and valued, something she rarely experienced in her daily life. "Rose," Ella said shyly, could I come back tomorrow? To see if you need any more help?" Rose's face lit up as if Ella had given her the greatest gift in the world. "I'd love to, darling. How about afternoon tea? I have some cinnamon cookies that are the house specialty." Ella agreed excitedly, her heart light for the first time in a long time. As he walked home, his steps had a new vigor. She couldn't wait for the next day. That night, lying in her bed, Ella reflected on her unexpected encounter with Rose. How could a simple act of kindness completely change her day? She thought about her co-workers, how different it would be if everyone was a little kinder to each other. With these thoughts in mind, Ella fell asleep, a soft smile on her lips. The next morning, Ella woke up with new energy. Even though she knew she would face another difficult day at work, the prospect of seeing Rose in the afternoon filled her with hope. At the office, things seemed even worse than usual. Her colleagues, Melissa and Sarah, were particularly cruel that day. Look at her hair, Ella heard Melissa whisper, loud enough for everyone around her to hear. It looks like a bird has built a nest in it. Sarah laughed, a cold sound that made Ella flinch in her seat. And those clothes? It looks like she bought them at a second-hand store. Doesn't she have a mirror at home? Ella tried to ignore the nasty comments, focusing on her work. But the words hurt, like little arrows hitting his heart. She wondered why people had to be so cruel to each other. During lunch, Ella hid in the bathroom, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. She looked in the mirror, seeing not the ugly, poorly dressed woman her colleagues described, but someone who was trying to do the best she could with what she had. "You have a heart of gold, Ella," she remembered Rose's words. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Taking a deep breath, Ella lifted her chin and returned to her desk. She wouldn't let the cruelty of others get her down. Not today. When the clock finally struck 5, Ella hurried out of the office. She couldn't wait to see Rose again, to feel that sense of peace and acceptance that she had experienced the day before. Arriving at Rose's house, Ella was amazed. It was a small, cozy house with a front garden full of colorful flowers. The sweet scent of roses and lavender filled the air, making Ella smile. Rose opened the door, her face lighting up when she saw Ella. "Come in, dear. The tea is ready and the biscuits have just come out of the oven." Inside the house, Ella immediately felt at home. The smell of freshly baked cookies mingled with the soft scent of fresh flowers. There were family photos everywhere, smiling faces that seemed to welcome Ella. Over tea and cookies, Ella and Rose chatted like old friends. Ella told Rose about her work and the difficulties she faced, about how she sometimes felt invisible and worthless. Rose listened intently, her eyes full of understanding and compassion. When Ella finished speaking, Rose took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Honey," she said softly, "don't let the cruel words of others dim your shine. You have a heart of gold, and that's worth more than any expensive outfit or fashionable hairstyle. The people who really matter will see that in you." Ella felt tears in her eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude and relief. No one had ever spoken to her like this before, with such kindness and understanding. When it was time to leave, Ella didn't want to leave. Rose's home felt like a refuge from the outside world, a place where she could be herself without fear of judgment. "Can I come back tomorrow?" she asked hopefully. Rose smiled, her eyes shining. "Of course you can, sweetheart. In fact, I was thinking, my garden needs some work. Would you like to help me over the weekend? We could plant some new flowers." Ella agreed excitedly, her heart filling with joy. She couldn't wait to spend more time with her new friend, to learn more about gardening and perhaps life. That night, lying in her bed, Ella thought about Rose. She thought about the lady's kindness, how she made her feel special and valued. For the first time in a long time, Ella felt truly hopeful about the future. Maybe, Ella thought as she fell asleep, I found more than just a new friend. Maybe I found a new beginning. And so, with a smile on her face and hope in her heart, Ella fell asleep, eager for what the future would bring. Little did she know that her meeting with Rose was just the beginning of a journey that would change her life forever. The weekend has arrived, bringing with it bright sunshine and a gentle breeze. Ella woke up early, excited at the prospect of spending the day in Rose's garden. She wore comfortable, old clothes perfect for working with soil and plants. Arriving at Rose's house, Ella found the elderly woman already in the garden, wearing a large straw hat and gardening gloves. Rose smiled when she saw Ella, her eyes shining with joy. "Good morning, darling," Rose called, waving. "Ready to get your hands dirty?" Ella smiled back, feeling light and happy. "Absolutely. Where do we start?" Rose showed Ella a flower bed that needed cleaning. Together they began pulling weeds, talking as they worked. "You know, Ella," Rose said, "every flower in this garden has a story. See those roses over there? They were planted by my husband on our wedding day." Ella looked at the roses, admiring their delicate petals. "They're beautiful," she said softly. "Your husband must be a very special man." Rose's smile became a little sad. "He was, darling. Harold passed away 5 years ago. But whenever I look at these roses, I feel like he's still with me." Ella felt her heart sink. She took Rose's hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm sorry, Rose. It must be difficult." Rose nodded, but her smile returned. "Yes, sometimes it is. But you know, Ella, life is like this garden. Sometimes we need to prune some parts so that new flowers can grow. The pain of loss never completely goes away, but we learn to cultivate new joys." Ella thought about Rose's words as they continued working. She thought about her own life, how she felt trapped in a cycle of sadness and loneliness. Maybe it was time to make some changes, to prune the negative parts so that new things could flourish. As they planted new flower seedlings, Rose told Ella about her grandson, James. "He's a wonderful young man," Rose said, her eyes shining with pride. "So kind and hardworking. You know, he's looking for a wife." Ella felt her cheeks turn red. "Oh," she said, trying to sound casual. "That's ... interesting." Rose laughed, a happy sound that made Ella smile. "Don't be embarrassed, darling. I'm just saying that sometimes love appears in the most unexpected places. Like these flowers we're planting. Who knows what will sprout?" They continued working for the rest of the morning, planting, watering, and tending the garden. Ella was surprised by how much she was enjoying it. There was something comforting about working with the land, about watching the plants grow and flourish under your care. When the sun was high in the sky, Rose suggested they take a lunch break. They entered the house, where Rose prepared sandwiches and fresh lemonade. Sitting on the porch, enjoying the meal and the view of the garden, Ella felt at peace. It was a feeling she rarely experienced, especially lately. "Rose," Ella said hesitantly, "can I tell you something?" Rose nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "Of course, honey. You can tell me anything." Ella took a deep breath. "At work, people aren't very kind to me. They make comments about my clothes, my hair. Sometimes I feel like no matter what I do, I'll never be good enough." Rose listened attentively, her face full of compassion. When Ella finished, Rose took her hand. "Ella, darling," she said softly, "you are more than good enough. Those people who treat you badly, they are wrong. Don't let their words define you." Ella felt tears in her eyes. "But it's so hard, Rose. Sometimes I believe what they say." Rose shook her head. "Remember the garden, Ella. Each flower is unique and special in its own way. Some people can only see the weeds, but it's the flowers that make the world more beautiful." Ella smiled through her tears. "Thank you, Rose. I don't know what I would do without you." After lunch, they returned to the garden. As they worked, Rose told Ella more about her family, about the hard times she had faced and how she overcame them. "Life isn't always easy," Ella Rose said as she pruned a bush. "But it's the challenges that make us grow. Like these plants. Sometimes we need to cut off some parts to make them stronger and healthier." Ella thought about Rose's words. She looked at her hands covered in dirt and realized that she felt stronger, more confident. Perhaps this garden was growing more than just flowers. Later in the afternoon, Ella and Rose admired their work. The garden seemed more alive, more colorful. New flowers had been planted, old ones had been pruned, and everything seemed to glow in the golden light of the setting sun. "We did a good job today," Rose said, smiling at Ella. "Thank you for your help, dear." Ella smiled back, feeling truly happy. "I'm the one who thanks you, Rose, for everything." When it was time for Ella to leave, Rose surprised her with an invitation. "Honey, next week I'm making dinner for my family. I'd like you to come." Ella was surprised. "Me? But it's a family dinner. I don't want to intrude." Rose took Ella's hands in hers. "You wouldn't be intruding. I want you to come." In fact, Rose hesitated for a moment. "I would like you to meet my grandson, James." Ella felt her heart speed up. "Oh," she said softly. I don't know, Rose." Rose smiled gently. "Think about it, okay? You don't have to decide now, but I think you two would get along really well." On the way home, Ella thought about Rose's invitation. Part of her was excited at the idea of meeting James, but another part was afraid. What if he didn't like her? And if he was like the people at your work? But then Ella remembered Rose's words about the garden, about how each flower was unique and special. Maybe it was time she started seeing herself that way too. That night before going to sleep, Ella looked at her hands. They were a little rough from garden work with some dirt stains that hadn't completely come off. But Ella smiled. These hands had created something beautiful today. Maybe they could create something beautiful in your life too. The day of dinner at Rose's house arrived faster than Ella expected. She spent hours getting ready, trying on different clothes and hairstyles. In the end, she opted for a simple but beautiful dress in light blue, which highlighted her eyes. When Ella arrived at Rose's house, her heart was beating so loudly that she was sure everyone could hear it. Rose opened the door, her face lighting up when she saw Ella. "Honey, you look beautiful," Rose exclaimed, pulling Ella into a warm hug. Come in, come in. Everyone is looking forward to meeting you." Ella entered the house, feeling nervous and excited at the same time. The room was full of people, all talking excitedly. Rose guided Ella around the room, introducing her to each member of the family. "And this," Rose said finally, standing next to a tall, dark-haired young man, "is my grandson, James." James turned around and Ella felt her heart skip a beat. He had kind eyes, the same shade of blue as Rose's, and a warm smile that immediately made Ella feel more at ease. "Hello, Ella," James said, extending his hand. "My grandmother talked a lot about you. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Ella squeezed James' hand, feeling a tingling run down her arm. "It's my pleasure," she managed, surprised that her voice didn't shake. During dinner, Ella found herself sitting between Rose and James. The food was delicious, and the conversation flowed easily. Ella discovered that James was a music teacher at a local school and loved his job. "It's amazing to see kids' faces light up when they learn a new song," James said, his eyes shining with excitement. "It's as if a whole world opened up to them." Ella smiled, enchanted by James' passion for his work. "It must be very rewarding," she said. "I always wanted to learn to play an instrument, but I never had the chance." "It's never too late to start," James replied with an encouraging smile. "If you want, I could give you some lessons." Ella felt her cheeks turn red. I'd love to," she said softly. Across the table, Rose watched the interaction between Ella and James with a satisfied smile. She could see the connection that was forming between the two, and her heart was filled with joy. After dinner, everyone gathered in the living room to drink coffee and talk. Ella was surprised by how comfortable she felt with Rose's family. They were warm and welcoming, making her feel like she was part of the group. In a moment, Ella found herself alone with James on the porch. The night air was cool and perfumed with the scent of garden flowers. "So," James said, looking at Ella with a gentle smile, "my grandmother told me you've been helping her in the garden." Ella nodded, smiling as she remembered the moment she had spent with Rose. "Yes, it's been wonderful. Your grandmother is an amazing person." "She really is," James agreed. "You know, she talks about you a lot. Says you have a heart of gold." Ella felt her cheeks heat up. "Rose is very kind. She's been a great friend to me." James looked at Ella for a long moment, his eyes filled with an emotion that Ella couldn't decipher. "Can I ask you a question, Ella?" Ella nodded, her heart racing. "Why do you think my grandmother wanted us to meet?" Ella swallowed, not knowing how to respond. I don't know," she said finally. "Maybe she thought we'd get along." James smiled, a smile that made Ella's heart skip a beat. "Well, I guess she was right. I'm really enjoying getting to know you, Ella." Before Ella could respond, Rose appeared on the porch. "Ah, there you are," she said with a smile. "I was wondering if we could all take a walk in the garden. It's such a beautiful night." Ella and James exchanged a look, both smiling. "Of course, Grandma," James said. "That would be great." As they walked through the moonlit garden, Ella found herself walking alongside James. They talked quietly, sharing stories and laughter. Ella couldn't believe how comfortable she felt with him, as if she had known him for years. At one point, James stopped near a bed of roses. He leaned over and picked up a flower, offering it to Ella with a shy smile. "For you," he said softly. "A reminder that you are as beautiful and special as these flowers." Ella took the rose, her heart beating so loudly she was sure James could hear it. "Thank you," she whispered, looking into James' eyes. For a moment the world seemed to stop. Ella felt like she was on the edge of something wonderful and scary at the same time. She saw in James' eyes the same mix of emotions that she was feeling. The moment was broken by the sound of Rose's voice, calling them back to the house. Ella and James separated, both a little flushed and out of breath. Back at the house, Ella realized it was getting late. She said goodbye to Rose's family, receiving warm hugs from everyone. When it was her turn to say goodbye to James, Ella felt her heart race again. "It was nice meeting you, Ella," James said, holding her hand for a moment longer than necessary. "I hope we can see each other again soon." Ella smiled, feeling happy and nervous at the same time. "I'd like that too," she replied softly. As Ella was about to leave, Rose pulled her into a hug. "Thank you for coming, darling," she whispered in Ella's ear. "You brought so much joy to this house." Ella felt tears in her eyes. "Thank you for inviting me, Rose. It was a wonderful night." On the way back home, Ella couldn't stop smiling. She thought of James, of his gentle smile and his kind eyes. She thought of Rose's family, so warm and welcoming. And she thought of Rose, the incredible woman who had brought so much light into her life. That night before bed, Ella looked at the rose James had given her. She placed it in a small vase of water, admiring its delicate petals. For the first time in a long time, Ella felt truly hopeful about the future. She didn't know exactly what would happen next, but she knew something had changed. Something new and wonderful was beginning to bloom in her life, like the flowers in Rose's garden. The sun had barely risen when Ella woke up on Monday. She stretched out on the bed, remembering dinner at Rose's house and meeting James. A soft smile appeared on her lips as she got ready for work. Arriving at the office, Ella noticed that something was different. People looked at her strangely, whispering among themselves. Melissa and Sarah, her classmates who used to be so cruel, threw furious glares in her direction. Confused, Ella sat at her desk and turned on her computer. It was then that she saw the email from her boss, asking to see her in her office immediately. Heart pounding, Ella knocked on Mr. Thompson's office door. "Come in," came the deep voice from the other side. Ella walked in, her hands shaking slightly. "Did you want to see me, Mr. Thompson?" Mr. Thompson looked at Ella over the top of his glasses. "Yes, Ella. Please sit down." Ella sat down, trying to remain calm. "Ella," Mr. Thompson began, "it has come to my attention that you have been the victim of office bullying. Why didn't you tell me about this sooner?" Ella gaped. "How did he know?" I didn't want to cause trouble," she stammered. Mr. Thompson shook his head. "Ella, bullying is unacceptable in our company. I got a very interesting call this morning from a lady named Rose Johnson. She told me everything." Ella felt her face turn red. Had Rose called her boss? She didn't know whether to be grateful or mortified. "Don't worry, Mr. Thompson continued, noticing Ella's expression. "Ms. Johnson just wanted to help, and she made me realize that we have a serious problem here that needs to be resolved." Ella nodded, still speechless. "Starting today, Mr. Thompson said firmly, there will be zero tolerance for bullying or harassment of any kind in this office. Melissa and Sarah will be formally warned, and all employees will undergo awareness training." Ella felt a wave of relief course through her body. Finally, someone was listening, someone was doing something. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," she said softly. Mr. Thompson smiled. "Don't thank me, Ella. I should have realized this sooner. And there's one more thing. I've been watching your work for the past few months. You're dedicated, efficient, and have great ideas. I'd like to offer you a promotion to the position of assistant executive." Ella was breathless. A promotion? She could hardly believe what she was hearing. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say yes, Mr. Thompson said with a smile. "You deserve it, Ella. It's your time to shine." With tears in her eyes, Ella accepted the promotion. She left Mr. Thompson's office feeling like she was floating. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Ella received congratulations from some colleagues, while others, including Melissa and Sarah, avoided her. But Ella didn't care. For the first time in a long time, she felt valued and respected at work. When work ended, Ella left the office with a smile on her face. She couldn't wait to tell Rose about everything that had happened. Arriving at Rose's house, Ella found not only the elderly woman, but also James waiting for her. "Surprise!" Rose exclaimed, pulling Ella into a hug. "James told me about your promotion. We're so proud of you, darling." Ella looked at James, who smiled shyly. "I hope you don't mind," he said. "My grandmother called me as soon as she found out, and I couldn't resist coming to congratulate you in person." Ella felt her heart speed up. "Thank you," she said softly. "It means a lot to me." The three entered the house, where Rose had prepared a celebratory dinner. As they ate and talked, Ella told them about her day, about how things had changed at the office. "See," Rose said with a smile, "I told you things would get better. Sometimes all we need is someone to believe in us." Ella looked at Rose and James, feeling a rush of gratitude. "You two changed my life," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." James took Ella's hand, his touch gentle and comforting. "You don't need to be grateful, Ella. You deserve all the happiness in the world." After dinner, James invited Ella for a walk around the garden. The night air was cool and perfumed with the scent of flowers. "Ella," James said softly, stopping near a bed of roses, "there's something I want to tell you." Ella felt her heart speed up. "What is it, James?" James took both of Ella's hands in his, looking deeply into her eyes. "From the moment I met you, I felt something special. You're kind, smart, and have the purest heart I've ever met. I'd like to get to know you better if you want." Ella felt tears of happiness in her eyes. "I'd love to, James," she whispered. Slowly, gently, James leaned in and kissed Ella. It was a sweet, tender kiss, full of promise and hope. When they separated, they were both smiling. They walked back to the house hand in hand, where Rose was waiting for them with a knowing smile. "Ah, young love," Rose said with a twinkle in her eye. "There is nothing more beautiful in the world." Ella and James laughed, blushing slightly. That night, when Ella finally returned home, she felt like she was floating on a cloud of happiness. She looked at the rose James had given her at their first dinner, still fresh in its vase. Ella took out her diary and began to write. "Dear Diary, today was a day I will never forget. So much has changed in such a short time. A few weeks ago I felt alone and worthless. Now I have wonderful friends, a job that values me and, well, maybe even a new love. Rose taught me that each person is like a flower in the garden of life. Some bloom early, others take longer. But with care, love, and patience, they can all become beautiful. I learned that it doesn't matter what others say or think about me. What matters is how I see myself, how I treat myself. And I promise that from now on I will treat myself with the same love and respect that Rose and James showed me. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. I know there will be challenges ahead, but I also know that I am no longer alone in facing them. Thank you, Rose, for being the gardener who took care of my soul when it needed it most. And thank you, James, for showing me that I can be loved just as I am. Tomorrow looks brighter than ever." Ella closed the diary with a smile. She looked out the window, seeing the stars twinkling in the night sky. Each of them seemed to wink at her, as if they were celebrating her happiness. Laying down on the bed, Ella thought about how her life had changed. From a withered and lonely flower, she had transformed into something beautiful and strong. And best of all, she knew this was just the beginning. With that comforting thought, Ella fell asleep, dreaming of flower gardens, kind smiles, and a future full of love and possibilities. And so, in a small corner of the world, a story of love, friendship, and personal growth blossomed, reminding everyone that with a little kindness and a lot of love, anyone can find their place in the sun.